But they have, in the past, felt that KM was the CIO shop, portals, technology, and they're trainers, and they love to do this part up here. You know, like this, standing in front of a class talking. I've actually seen trainers that don't even use PowerPoint yet. You go to some hotels, see this machine down here? See this machine? What do they call these things? Dinosaur. Overhead. We actually go to hotels and they say, we've got all the electronic equipment for you. And say, okay, fine. And we show up and that's what they have. So trainers are not notorious for being out on the bleeding edge. However, there are statistics to say, well, I'm getting just a little ahead of myself. Let me show you what below the blue line is. Below the blue line is learner-led. It's knowledge sharing. And in contrast to instructional material, it's non-instructional material. And that looks like knowledge bases, people mentoring each other, reflection and innovation, creation of new knowledge maybe on a personal basis, and all kinds of virtual collaboration. Some people would say that's knowledge management down there and that's the learning profession. Totally wrong, but that's what some people would say. Let's look at how much learning takes place in these two categories. Can anybody guess at what that number is up there? I know a few people who know exactly what it is, and they're going to say, life's an open book exam. I got my book right here and it tells me, right? Tony, you remember what this number is?
10 to 20%, I think.
Something like that, close enough.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's not.
Okay, 10 to 30. Well, that's what I said. It's close enough for government work. Well, if you got the bottom one, you can always go. All right.
Isn't that the type of training they're in right now, the top one?
No.
No, we're very much into this, though. You have to have a little face-to-face, but.
So we're at 50 to 60%.
Oh, something like that, yeah. Okay. Here's the killer app to this. The research that was published in Harvard Business Review 2 years ago said this isn't the first research to do this. This is kind of like a capstone. This type of research has been going on for many years, and here's the conclusion. Those companies that spend disproportionately more on education and training beat their competition.
Beat their what?
Beat their competition, period. End of conversation, it's over. That's it. In fact, humorously, they said, if you are the CEO of your company and have some investment capital, either invest it in your people or go down the street and invest in one of your competitors who is investing in their people. You don't usually find that kind of humor in Harvard Business Review, but it was there. All right, if 10 to 30% of learning takes place in this sector up here, and 70, 90% takes place down here, and this is, let's say temporarily, the domain of KM, what do you think the conclusion will be of the research 5 or 10 years from now? If we do this well, those companies that have been doing KM, executing KM well, beat their competition. Invest in KM or go down the street and invest in your competitor who is investing in KM. But there is a little proviso in there, and that is the companies that are doing it well. Everybody knows how to do training, and most companies either do a good job in-house or they outsource it. It's not, it's basically a no-brainer, but there are some fantastic technologies coming along, and I hope in a very soon future chapter meeting we'll talk about some really leading edge technologies, and that's your technology, and I'll just give you a hint on it. This type of training is called just-in-case training. Okay? I have this course that I've made out of this knowledge management domain. I've boiled it down into something about a basketball size, and Tim, I toss it out to you just in case you need it. I'm walking away 6 months from now. I marked that off before, and that's 6 months later. Do you know how much you're going to remember 6 months from now? 5 to 10%. So what does that mean? Just in case training is mostly a waste. What we really need to have is just at the right time. Now you all know that, you've heard that already. Just at the right time training. And just at the right time training more ties in with this type of support than up there, generally speaking. The next wave of technology, which if we have a few minutes at the end and during the question and answer period, I'll draw you a little diagram of it, is what you have invented, which I call just for you training. So I'll leave that hanging out there as a little item of interest. And if somebody wants to ask me a question about it towards the end, we can spend a few minutes on it. But now I need to proceed forward, getting some more into the personal KM stuff. That word down there, performance support, is critically important. How many people have heard of the term performance support? Well, yeah, in the class, yeah, I hope. Not very many. What can I say? If you don't know what performance support is all about, you don't know what KM is all about. Well, we'll just leave that. We can do that some future time. Performance is all about getting the best knowledge of the right person at just the right time. An example of performance support that would be built into a system would be Word, where it corrects your spelling for you. But we're not always on Word. Much of what we do is not sitting on Microsoft Word or something like that. Much of what we do is dealing with people and doing stuff. Well, the same concept is still critically important. Get the best knowledge of the right person, right time. In the case of Word, it was getting the spelling of that word to you when, in fact, you had made some little typo on it. But there's a lot more important than just the correct spelling, and getting the best knowledge of the right person, right time is all about performance support. It's all about not just, certainly not just in case training provided to you just in case you need it. It's all about just at the right time training. And when you go beyond just training and you start talking about non-instructional content, it's getting whatever it is you need. A contact with a person who can answer your question, or access to some type of a knowledge base that has the explicit knowledge that you need, if not instantly, certainly in a very short period of time. So that's a very powerful argument for KM. And I introduce personal KM by looking at that, because I think personal KM is definitely going to be focusing down here at the individual level, making sure that I get the best knowledge to myself. And some of that best knowledge are some techniques that I can apply that are going to improve my personal performance right here at my desk. So the conclusion is, our employees' knowledge is our greatest asset. Speaking of human capital as our most important asset, consider this. Well, that's the only, everybody got that? Okay. Usually I have a lot of jokes and puns, but I didn't, considering the time, I didn't throw a lot in tonight. Okay, one of the critical start points, I think, for personal KM was brought to my attention by one of my students who said, I've got a nugget for you. It's this book, Now Discover Your Strengths. Let me just give you a sense for it. There was a lady in my class who said, I had fear of heights. And some psychologist or psychiatrist, I don't have anything against psychologists and psychiatrists, don't get me wrong, but some psychologist or psychiatrist got a hold of that lady and said, we can solve that problem. And a couple of years and many thousands of dollars later, she was able to walk over to the window and peer out at in a high building. So what? But she had this fear of heights, and somebody convinced her she needs to get rid of it. At the same time, she read this book. And the book said, everybody's got weaknesses or places where they don't have strengths. If you want to really exceed in life, don't worry about those weaknesses unless they're a fatal flaw. So I give that, I caution you. If you have a child who has a couple of A's and a couple of B's and an F, you got to work on that F, because you know that, okay? But many of us would think, well, I'm going to work, by golly, we're going to get that F up to an A. That's exactly the wrong thing to do. Get the F up to passing and then let the child determine for himself, which is probably indicated by some of those A's, where you should focus the rest of your attention. Did you get that? That might have been a little obtuse.